there's nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby Blog. We're live on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube as well. And thank you for everyone that's watching. We've got a few people watching with us on Facebook. Hello to Alan McDonald, Patreon and longtime friend of the podcast. Alan said he hadn't realised the theme tune was actually a full song. He thought it was one of my GarageBand creations that I do for the jingles on the podcast. Well, I don't know whether or not the band that do that are going to be offended by that, Alan. Hopefully not. But that's Coyote by Wooden Tooth. So it's a very good, it's off an EP. So go and look that out. But they very kindly let us use that as our opening credits. Joining me this evening, then, and we've got some rugby to talk about tonight, which is very exciting. We have Ian Hay.
Hello.
And Sandy Smith.
Evening all.
Balance has been restored. I'm here to sit in the middle, firmly neutral between
the yin and the yang.
The yin and the yang, the west and the east. We on evening, Cammy. Can't see or hear anything. Well, Andy, I hope that's your issue, not ours, because I can hear the boys here, all right?
Hold on.
I can hear you, Ian.
I'll look on the Facebook.
I can hear you guys.
Hopefully that's working. Anyway, for everybody now.
If it's not working, well, if Alan's watching it, well, I was going to say if Alan's watching it, he can't hear or see anything, he should give us a message, but obviously he wouldn't be able to hear that, so he wouldn't be able to send me a message, so that's stupid.
We'll get a message in about 20 seconds time from people telling us that they can hear this.
They can't see.
It's weird. It's like broadcasting from the future or the past. I can't work out which way it works. Anyway.
That seems to be working now. I'm looking at it on Facebook. It's bizarre though, because of the delay. I can see myself talking, but I don't know.
20 seconds ago. It's like being Marty McFly, but in a really short time.
Just the almanac.
So you can visit the blog, scottishrugbyblog.co.uk. Alan McDonald says, I can hear you, you slump.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah.
Did he say that is that an insult, or is he saying that I slump in my chair? I don't understand.
I don't know. Flump. He meant flump. It was a misprint.
Flump, right.
There we go. I think that was meant to be an insult. So yes, you can visit the blog, scottishrugbyblog.co.uk. We're on Twitter at ScottRugbyBlog, at Cammy Black, and on Facebook, facebook.com/ScottishRugbyBlog. We're on Twitch, which is, if you search Scottish Rugby Podcast, we're actually the only rugby podcast on there still. Groundbreakers that we are. We've got two followers. We've got two followers, which I think is probably some confused American gamers that stumbled upon us. If you listen to this on Twitch, do let us know. We're just scoping it out. You can also listen to this as well on any podcast apps out there: Apple, Acast, Spotify. We're on all the apps as well, so you don't have to watch us live. You can listen to us afterwards as well. We also have. Now we've got a Patreon, which is like a little subscribers group. So for about the price of a beer per month or a little bit more, you can get some bonus extra content. You get an audio version of the podcast with no adverts in it. So some people quite like that. We also are committing to at least once a month putting out an extra podcast. So this month you've had a Q&A that Ian and I did with John last week, which was all sorts of fun. We talked about the difference between pizza and quiche. And a rule for deciding what toppings work better on a pizza or quiche. We also did a long discussion about a roadmap to a third pro team in Scottish Rugby, which is well worth listening back to. We had got quite deep into that on there. So for £3 a month, you enter the Richie Vernon Thunderdome. Only one enters, no one leaves. Is that how it works? Everyone enters, no one leaves. You can't cancel your Patreon at any time. I should stress that. So we've got the Richie Vernon Thunderdome for £3 a month. And for £5 a month, you can enter the Dougie Donnelly Presidential Suite, where we will take your jacket, sit you down, and get you the finest cigar and rolled between the thighs of a llama or something. I was trying not to be sexist there. I started to be sexist and then I backed out. We'll get you a drink. We'll sit you down. We'll look after you, but we'll also read your name out on the podcast as well and give you a bit of a shout out too. So quite a bit of news to get through and some rugby to talk about. So first bit of news, John Barclay has the long, slow death of John Barclay's career has finally been put out of its misery, Sandy, because there was an indication, I think, at one point that he was going to retire, then he wasn't, and he was kind of hanging on for the right deal. But now he's finally confirmed that he's gone, and he's gone with a Times, a kind of semi-passive aggressive Times article, kind of lobbing sort of, I wouldn't say grenades, maybe some smoke bombs.
It's to be honest, I don't want to get too ahead of myself because there's some hands in the ruck from relating to this later on. I can't, and as ungenerous as this is, I can't help but feel that the retirement is now because there was no offers. I mean, maybe there were, but if there were offers, they weren't ones that were appealing, ones that would drag him away from his nice home here in Edinburgh. And I think that's got more to do with the announcement and the passive-aggressive stuff. Well, who knows? But we'd be surprised if there's an autobiography somewhere along the lines, and it's already starting to generate a wee bit of publicity for that, along with his move to his new publishing house.
Yeah, I mean, he's now writing a regular column for the Times, Ian. So you've got to get those clicks in, and it was fairly clickable. Some of the stuff that was in there.
Yeah, I assume the Times pay better than the BBC.
Your next protocol, Ian.
So, getting paid? What? Yeah, I've not actually read. Did I read the Times article? I don't think I did, but I remember seeing his Instagram post, and that's quite sort of lengthy. Yeah, no, there's been a few rumblings from Edinburgh supporters that he's not exactly Mr. Popular and whatnot, and they're not particularly sorry to see the back of him. But I mean, it's quite strange because I mean, he's in his retirement speech he was saying, it's time to hang the coat up. I'm 32 now. There's these injuries, whereas just a couple of months previously, but I suppose he was still looking for a job at this point. He was saying, he felt he'd been playing some of the best rugby of his career sort of more recently, and that his body was holding up okay. So a bit of misinformation there from one side or the other. But I just think, like Sandy said, I just don't think there's anyone came in for him really. Obviously, with the financial issues that we're all facing, budgets are tighter. So I just don't think anyone could afford him really.
Yeah, like you said, I think Sandy, there's if you're stuck in Edinburgh, and that's where he wants to sell. Fair enough. I think he's got some business interests in the city now. Obviously looking towards a post rugby career. Really, that limits your options to Glasgow, Edinburgh, or a stretch Newcastle. Yeah, but certainly no further afield. Newcastle are still in the chat. I mean, they're promoted to the Premiership whenever the next season actually resumes, but they're a Championship side at the moment, so their budget's going to be stretched. They've already pretty stacked in the back row as well. So it's yeah, I mean, it's not maybe no surprise that he's gone, but I think are you wanting to save this for your hands in the Rick this week? It is. Are you wanting to?
Well, no. I mean, the only other thing I would say is that I think it really. I mean, when he obviously arrived at Edinburgh, he unfortunately picked up that injury with Scarlets in his what would have been his second last game for them, but and obviously it didn't start too well. And then he came on to a bit of a game, but in all honesty, he was overtaken. It's just as simple as that. I don't think there would be many Edinburgh supporters now would say, who you would switch out of that back row for John Barclay, and I think that's unfortunately just uncomfortable truth of the matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't make him a bad player. It's just that younger, hungrier, leaner guys have come along. That's all it is.
And I suppose it's quite hard, I suppose, in a Scottish squad, and when I say Scottish squad, not the national squad, but in a Scottish pro team, then the young guys always take precedence, because you can't have, for want of a better expression, dead wood hanging around. It's not, you can't be paying mega wages to have someone come in and be bin juice, which we'll come on to in a bit, but be a wider squad player on the wages that John Barclay be looking for.
Yeah, I mean, how many 21, 22-year-olds can you get for John Barclay's wages is really what it adds up to, or a combination of that and perhaps the money that's been, saved up elsewhere by other people that haven't been necessarily replaced, such as Hickey. But you just can't. There's no point in moaning, I think, and again I'm straying towards it. No point in moaning when you get to the end that you're no longer wanted. That's the nature of the beast, and take it. I'd like you to think to take it with some good grace that you've had plenty of time in the limelight, and it's now somebody else's turn.
Yeah, I mean, there were certainly elements of that in the article that, when your time comes, it comes. And like you said, Ian, that maybe he thought he had a bit more, but maybe actually the longer having no preseason went on, then the harder that was going to be to get to a level where he could play professionally again. But you got the impression he knew his time had come, but at the same time, maybe felt like more that he's been cast. Certainly, the impression was he's been cast aside rather than. And that more should be done for rugby players leaving rugby.
This is a common complaint, though, really, isn't it? But like Sandy said, it's kind of the nature of the beast. John Barclay, he'll have taken somebody's place when he was coming through, and now it's the circle of life, isn't it?
It's like Logan's run.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The spot on his hands turned red, and it's time to go into the fiery furnace.
Actually, speaking of possibly going to Newcastle, did you see Gary Graham signed a new contract today with him?
Has he?
No, yeah, it's 2 or 3 year deal he signed. So yeah, he'll be playing Premiership rugby for them when it kicks off next season.
It resumes, yeah. The other bit, speaking of disgruntled ex-players, we've also had an interview with Rugby Pass with Gav Harper interviewed Rory Hughes, good old Rosa, which was enlightening, Ian. Rory Hughes isn't Dave Rennie's biggest fan. I think it's safe to say that. Felt that he was given lots of promises that weren't kept. There was some interesting revelation about going to Leicester and Leicester not being particularly that much of a professional organisation. But it is, and then kind of something that John Barclay touched on in the interview, it is really down to how these wider squad players are being treated and the messages that are being given to them. And we talked about Matt Smith a couple of episodes ago and the way that he had felt, and Rory Hughes touched on that a little bit in his interview. But Rory Hughes, I'm going to time mark this so I remember what to take this out, but Rory Hughes essentially said that Dave Rennie talked shite to my face. And that's the impression. I mean, Matt Smith effectively said the same, is that this is what coaches are doing, is they're giving promises, and to a certain extent they have to give promises to keep people on the hook, to keep them interested. But at the same time, if those promises aren't fulfilled, then you're going to start to get disgruntlement in the ranks. And Rory Hughes, Matt Smith and Rory Hughes are not outliers here. There is a sense that the kind of once a warrior, always a warrior isn't necessarily true for everyone.
He was quite forthright with his opinions, as you would expect from good old Rosa. But no, it's anyone who follows us on Twitter might have seen that this is it's a sort of repeating pattern, because Alex Dunbar has said a similar thing a few months ago, as well as Matt Smith. So for all that Dave Rennie talks about creating, building a great culture, and he's fully aware that he's got these sort of young men that he can sort of mould in a sort of almost like a sort of fatherly kind of way. He always talked about building great teams and great men, building great human beings. But then there seems to be, over-promising and under-delivering to certain players, to these guys who are, they know they're not first names on the team sheet. But, if they're for all this talk of building great cultures and whatnot, it seems to be, it's not being backed up. Or certainly some players are feeling that's the case. And if it's maybe just one person, you could always put into sour grapes or have you. But it's a few instances now. So maybe it was just all talk from Dave Rennie. Obviously, he's got his side of the story as well, and it would be unfair to just instantly sort of go Team Rosa. But it's like I said, it's a few people that have said the same thing now.
Yeah. I mean, Alan McDonald makes a fair point. I think Sandy's saying it, not to be harsh, but isn't that a reality of employment for many of us, that you maybe do feel undervalued. I would say that a good manager will make everyone feel valued and understand their place in an organisation, even if that place is to carry the tackle bags and take the water on the pitch. That your role in that is explained very clearly to you, and the expectations are made clear to you, and your expectations are managed to an extent, but that you aren't given false promises. That to me is good management. We had when we did our Lions retrospective, that's why the 97 Lions tour worked, because they didn't have any. There were dirt trackers, but the dirt trackers understood where their place in that squad was, and there was no grumbling from them at all.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't feel I've got to, not that he needs me to help him, but I mean, it's easy when he's not present to point the daggers in Dave Rennie's direction. And as Alan says, it's, that's in a competitive business like this, and you've only got 23 guys in a match day squad, somebody's going to be, to use that phrase, the bin juice. And chances are it's, half of those, or maybe 3/4 of those people that you would call bin juice are going to be perpetually that, because they're either not as talented as the ones, or the opportunities just don't come in their direction. You're right, though. It's how is there a way to actually keep those guys happy? Because you've got to try and make sure that if they do get called upon, that they feel that they were worthy of it. But at the same time, you're probably not going to be calling on them too often. So you've maybe got to, and that, again, it sounds harsh, but I don't know that I just don't know that there's it's all very well in a tour when you know you're only going to be carrying the tackle bags for 3 weeks and you're down in New Zealand and enjoying the camaraderie and all the rest of it. But when it's your day in, day out job, and potentially, or you'll have a reasonable idea that your chances are limited.
Yeah,
it's not the same as easy to make that to bolster somebody to the point that they're always going to be happy.
I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? This is all generally coming out of Glasgow, these grumblings. I mean, John Barclay seems to be a bit of an outlier with Edinburgh, and there may have been other issues at Edinburgh for him that might have fed into how he felt. But Matt Smith was at Edinburgh very briefly at the end of the season, but not long enough to get his feet under the table. And I know he felt like Richard Cockerell was spinning in the same lines, but I don't think equally Richard Cockerell had any time to make good on any promises he'd made. But there doesn't seem to be the same sense of departing Edinburgh players having the same complaints. Matt Scott talked about the fact that the contract was withdrawn at short notice, but that Richard Cockerell went and made contact with Leicester and effectively, did a lot of the ground, acted as an agent for him almost to get him the job. So it seems to be maybe symptomatic of something that's gone on at Glasgow for a period, rather than a kind of problem within Scottish rugby as a whole. And maybe Richard Cockerell's better at it. I don't know.
Well, certainly that would. I mean, the fact that he reached out to Leicester and try and get him a job, which he eventually got, is certainly going to take away some level of annoyance you're going to feel at being not getting the contract you thought you were going to get. Perhaps it's maybe just as simple as that, is that, if you think you've been jettisoned, but you do then pick up a contract with one of the biggest sides in English rugby, you're maybe not quite so annoyed. Whereas if you've not got a job at all, or you feel as if you've been downgraded, you've gone to a club that you don't think is as good, maybe you've got more cause for, or you feel you've got more cause for disgruntlement.
Yeah. Anything else from either of you on Rosa Hughes and John Barclay before we move on?
No, I'm good.
No, a bit of parish notices almost. That we've got a new president of the SRU in Colin Rigby, and Ian Barr Ian Barr's the president, sorry, and Colin Rigby's now vice president. So that's gone through as part of a virtual part one of an AGM. So doing it in two parts. So Colin Rigby's from Stuart's Mel, and he defeated Keith Wallace of Haddington by 112 votes to 97. So it's fairly close. Ian Barr served his 2 years as vice VP, so he goes on to be president, taking over from Dee Bradbury. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. I know kind of Ian Barr's been a bit of a kind of outspoken critic of the way things, I guess, SRU have gone. We've only had part one of the AGM. There's various motions going to and fro around Super 6, around accounts. We're getting delayed accounts because of COVID. So watch this space. Things might get interesting politics-wise in Scottish rugby. The big news, though, is we've got some actual rugby happening this weekend on Saturday. We've got, now I'll get this the right way around, Glasgow versus Edinburgh, because, and let's start with the match allocation. This is Glasgow's home game, Ian, at Murrayfield. They've presumably swapped it because there's a chance, a very tiny, tiny chance that they might try and get some fans in for the second leg of this, which would more likely be Edinburgh fans, given that Glasgow haven't really got much skin left in the game this season. Is that fair? Do you think that? I mean, there's been a couple of Glasgow Warriors fans saying, why isn't this at Scotstoun? But I think everyone understands why. Yeah,
it's hard to social distance at Scotstoun. You'd get like two people in the north stand, and that'd be about you. Also, obviously, if it's to reduce travel and the risk of possible infection spreading, that would make sense that if the very slim chance of supporters getting in, it would make more sense for it to be Edinburgh fans. I think actually Rhiannon McCrory came up with an interesting theory about how next year, if they reverse it so it's like Edinburgh have got 2 home games, it means they can do Silver Saturday next year, which I thought was an interesting take.
It's an interesting take.
I'm not that, these are dead rubbers for Glasgow, really. There is hee-haw chance of us getting into the playoffs. So it's, it's no skin off my nose, but they class as a home or away game. And anyway, it's an away game anyway, because it's in Murrayfield, so,
Presumably you get the nicer changing room.
I think there was... Did we chat about that yesterday? I thought it was actually one of the questions somebody asked Danny Wilson yesterday. Are you allowed to talk
about what are you allowed to talk about? Because we know you've interviewed Fraser Brown, Danny Wilson, and Cockers. I think we're allowed to say you've done that. We've got Mish in the morning. But what press conferences are you allowed to talk about, Ian, at this point? Because some of them are under embargo.
At the moment, just Danny Wilson.
Danny Wilson.
Although I've seen Andy Newport has written something about from Cockers' press conference today on Rugby Pass, so I think we can maybe talk about that. But Fraser Brown stuff's under embargo until 10 o'clock, so can't say anything for another hour. I mean, we could say it for the podcast because I won't go out after 10, but people are watching.
It's going out live now. Yeah,
so we can. So yes, we can talk about Danny Wilson. He wasn't too sure if he was going to take the change room. I think I've not actually listened back to the calls yet. I'm going to do that after this. I'm going to do the Glasgow article after this, and then after speaking to the Mish, which we're all very excited about, I'm sure. Tomorrow I'll do the Edinburgh one.
Yeah. So Sandy, I don't think it makes much difference to anybody really. This, especially this first game, it's pre-season, isn't it?
Yeah. The only thing seemed a bit odd is, and on the grand scale, it's not the most important, is that I think this game on Saturday has been designated as the 1872 game, which is, technically incorrect, because maybe this lends some fuel to Rhiannon's fires, because it should have been the Edinburgh home game that was 1872. I mean, I know but the home games are all in these wee inverted commas. I know that, but so other than that, yeah, right. It makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. in what order, I suppose, and they're all playing at the same place. The only thing for me is I had done a thing for the virtual match day program, which I've now had to throw in the bin because the match day program would only be for the Edinburgh game, the home game, and things could have entirely changed by next week. So, so I'm going to have to bloody write that. Excuse my language.
Just keep the Mace bit and then just update a few bits here and there.
Aye.
Fine. So, I mean, it's hard to gauge really kind of what we're going to see from this. We've seen photos of everyone back in training. We know they've started contact training again, but we're in complete uncharted territory. I think you've got no one's going to be match conditioned, but it's not. 1872 cups and games are not known for players holding back. So it's not going to be but it's going to be strange watching at Murrayfield. I mean, we've no news from Premier Sports as to whether or not there's going to be crowd noise pumped in, but it's Murrayfield. So if you, no offense, Sandy, if you're pumping in normal Edinburgh crowd noise, then you wouldn't notice much difference. Sorry.
It's just
I'll
because
get a dig at Ian later on.
It's just because of where they put that's all.
But it is. I mean, yes, and you go.
Yeah, but I mean, if the evidence of the English Premiership's then to go by, what we'll get is loads and loads of penalties and drop passes and people getting used to the reapplication of the laws that they've not been used to. And the first game may well be an awful lot more scrappy than the second one. I mean, they usually are scrappy affairs at the best of times, the 1872 games, the Glasgow Edinburgh games. So, with a lack of play and even the Super Rugby stuff, the first couple of games, there was a fairly high penalty count until the players all kind of got to grips with what they were being expected to do. So, and I think that'll be exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at a kind of, I don't know, I think the weather's not looking great for the weekend, Ian, but it's not a classic 1872 kind of scrap on the deck. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, even though it's, this is summer rugby, the summer rugby dream that I envisaged. It's been honking today. I'm not holding it for a classic. I think we will see a lot of penalties. I mean, I think Leicester conceded 28 penalties in their game, which is absolutely remarkable. 28 penalties is... the most managers say that you want to keep your penalty count into single figures. So that's about 3 matches worth they've got there. And obviously, when this was getting discussed, Richard Cockrell saying, I've got matches to win because I've got a semi-final, possibly a final. But Danny Wilson might have more of a chance to experiment with his team. Of course, famously, as has been revealed, there is going to be a surprise at 15.
Mm-hmm. We think it's Hugh Jones.
Yep, we're pretty sure it's Hugh Jones, even though I don't ever think I've seen him kick. So that'll be interesting.
Who was it said that was it on our group chat? Someone said Scott Cummings has kicked more than Hugh Jones in a match.
Yeah, John. Yeah,
John.
And then I said I've seen Sam Skinner kick more often, and I've only seen about 3 hours of Sam Skinner. But Jones has played wing for the Stormers before. I think he's maybe filled in a couple of times for Warriors, if it's been a bit of a reshuffle. Fullback would be interesting. Obviously, he's a very good broken field runner. So if he's got plenty of open paddock to run into, it'd certainly be one of his strengths. But how is he under the high ball? How's his one-on-one tackling? Obviously the sort of disaster down in Wales, we questioned Hugh Jones' defensive abilities. There've been a few question marks over his defensive abilities, to be fair, as there is of Stuart Hawkes. So it would be a recurring theme. But no, it'd be interesting to see him there. It seems to be that's the number one sort of number one thought is that it's going to be Hugh Jones. Stafford McDowell's also been mentioned. I mean, he's got an absolute cannon of a left foot. But yes, it looks like it's going to be Jones. Also, interestingly, Danny Wilson has said that Nakarawa isn't going to be available for both games. He's still in Fiji after birth of his child, and also flights, I think, only resumed this week. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, with Nakarawa, he said that he does envisage him playing in the back row quite a lot this year. Obviously, you've got Cummings, who's, Scotland international frequently nowadays. He's a very good player. He's only 23, so a lot of coming from him. And Richie Gray as well. He can't play 6. He's a bit slow for that, I think. So it looks like we'll see a bit more of Nakarawa in the back row this year.
I mean, we saw when we went to the city. I mean, he played 8 at Sale. I think that game, and it's he's got all the skills to do it, and he's done it before. It would seem a good option if it allows Glasgow to kind of mix things up a bit. I mean, you get it's another lineup option.
He's pretty good over the ball as well. 2015 World Cup, he was actually one of the top jacklers, and seeing as Fiji went out in the group stages, that's quite an achievement. So that'll be interesting.
I don't think there's a wee bit of concern, I think, on Twitter this morning that the kind of quotes that come out from Danny Wilson were that Leone Nakarawa was looking like he's doing another runner like he did at Paris last year. But I think it genuinely is that flights have only just resumed from Fiji. He went to Fiji with the full blessing of everybody involved at the time. Due to COVID, I think there was one of the last planes out he got to go back home because of the birth of his child, and he's got family out there. But it makes sense if you can't get back, no matter, even if he's been doing full Rocky IV training, chopping logs with his bare hands and running up mountains in Fiji, then you're still a way off kind of being able to rock straight up to Murrayfield, put your boots on and play. So I don't think there's nothing concerning, I don't think. And I think maybe some of Danny Wilson's quotes are maybe taken out of when they're written down, saying I have full confidence in the player returning in writing looks like you don't have any confidence. But assuming at the press conference it sounded fairly genuine that he's coming back and they are confident that he is.
Yes, good, but he delivered the lines. He was kind of having a wee joke at first, like I don't know, is he coming back? But I think it was. I think he was just sort of clarifying. He is. We're confident he's going to come back. Obviously, weird things can happen, but no, we're pretty sure Leone Nakarawa will be back. Just not in time for the 1872 games. How
are you feeling, Sandy? Then, because Glasgow kind of got, and this is what Ian was talking about, and it's kind of pre-embargo that Rugby Pass have jumped the gun a wee bit here, and we've got a quote from Richard Cockrell talking about how Danny Wilson doesn't hold any secret. There are no secrets in Scottish rugby. Danny Wilson, being former forwards coach, doesn't have any more insight as a Glasgow coach than he would do of the Glasgow players. But I suppose from Glasgow's point of view, Danny Wilson has, the ability to use these 2 games for pre-season. Really, is a free roll of the dice almost. Whereas Edinburgh maybe aren't going to have that much of a chance to kind of experiment or try anything different. Is that a worry, or are you is consistency a good thing?
I'm happy with the fact that I suspect that the Edinburgh team had, at least 13 out of 15 I reckon unless something different has happened to training to say otherwise, 13 out of 15 will be the ones that had started the last games against Cardiff or what before. So, and I think that's not a bad thing at this stage when you've got to go straight potentially into a semi-final, quarter-final of the Challenge Cup. Great if you're not, at the business end and you want to try and get started off for the new season, then you use the time. But there's not that many new faces, I think, at Edinburgh that would go straight in anyway. I can't really see that. We've obviously lost Matt Scott, but George Taylor's probably the replacement right there. And the up and coming guy. Other than that, everybody's pretty much the same as what they were.
Yeah,
and that's assuming they're all fit and ready to go. I think that's a good thing.
Who are the ones you think? What positions do you think in it for Edinburgh are the ones that you're uncertain about? Because I'm not going to make you pick a 15 because by the time some people listen to this, the 15s are going to be picked and it'll be gone. We'll be talking about history. But what positions are you not sure about, Sandy? From Edinburgh's
I think there's only for me. If I was me, I would, based on past performance and being no indication of the future and all the rest of it. There's only really 2 where there's a debate as well. At 9. where you're really either starting with Groom or Henry. I would go with Henry for this personally. I think he offers more control in this sort of game, particularly one where there's going to be a lot of penalties, lots of mistakes, and somebody that has that control, I think, is ideal for that. And then the other one I think is intriguing is at 1. I mean, Rory Sutherland obviously before lockdown was ripping up trees, and by listening to Pierre Schumann on various places as he's been advertising his new business as well as rugby, he said that Sutherland has been looking brilliant in training as well. And then there's and just to sort of give some background to that, really, is that in that last game against Cardiff, Edinburgh started with Jamie Batty at loosehead, and at 45 minutes, things weren't looking too clever. And I don't think it was all down to Jamie, but he was subbed, on came Pierre Schumann, and still was awarded man of the match, and was turned around what looked like a game we were going to lose into a winning position, quite a tight, edgy game. So there's a good, and I think they will, regardless, and maybe not even just this game, I can see them having more time each other or certainly Sutherland having more time on the pitch, whether he's starting or coming on, rather than the sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes that they were getting before, because he's obviously starting to look like the guy that we know he can be. So potentially start with Sutherland and bring on Schumann for an impact later on in the game.
Yeah,
the rest of them, I think it's just, I mean, you know the positions, the back three picks itself, and probably the rest of the scrum picks itself, to be honest.
Yeah. Any big question marks for Glasgow then, Ian? I mean, I suppose it's hopefully see big Richie Gray in second row. You might get, I suppose centres are going to be interesting. 10's pretty much nailed on. Probably looking at Ali Price at 9. It's any kind of, apart from 15, which I've seen someone suggested tonight, Brandon Thompson for an option at 15, and I think I've already blocked that person.
Yeah, no, it was there was another suggestion, Pete Horn at 15, but I don't think he's got the gas. Aki Sealy, he's injured. He's carrying, I think, was it a hamstring injury he's got, or Kyle Staines got a hamstring tweak. So those boys are out. Centre is a position in Glasgow fairly well stacked at. Wings, probably Seymour and Matawalu, or maybe Nico will be on the bench, because that is, I mean, it's that whole the outside backs are really the we were missing men, and obviously Stain can play there as well. But if he's not going to be fit, that's another body you can't count on. Yes, I think just outside backs, and who is going to be locking. Obviously Nakarawa is not an option, so we think it would be at least Cummings, Gray. Hopefully Richie Gray will be playing. Danny Wilson, as I said, he's available for selection. So I reckon we'll probably see Gray and Cummings with McDonald on the bench possibly, or maybe even Harley, so you can cover lock and back row. Loosehead might be a bit of an issue, seeing as Keble, if Sealy's not fit, Keble's there. I can't even think who else is there. You'd probably be looking to one of the young boys, like Adam Nicholl. Can he play that side? Or Murray McCallum? So I'd say Loosehead and outside backs, particularly the wings, are the areas of concern for me, and also a backup option at 10.
Yeah, and Sani, I'm going to put you on the spot then. What are you going for in for a score then? Because it's quite. I mean, it's hard to call because we've got no form to go off.
Well, I'll just give you what I put on the what do you call it? The predictor thing. I've forgotten the name of it. Edinburgh to win by 20.
Whoa, that's big talk, Ian.
This is a
go big or go home.
This is our home game, so we will go home. Thank you. Edinburgh by 12. No, not quite 20. 10 between 10 and 12. 10 and 15. We'll go for a 5-point spread. 10 to 15 point Edinburgh win. Because Glasgow don't care.
It's like a training. This is a training match. Is it?
Excuses in early. There you go.
We're actually doing it for the benefit of Scottish Rugby, letting you top the conference so you get an easier, so you get the home game. So we're doing it for you.
That's very kind.
As to a fault, I would say.
Okay, now I understand, Sandy. You've got a quiz for us. Now, before we do it, what quiz could we have without having a quiz theme song? So we're going to go with this. We're going to go with this if I can get it to work.
It's time for you to play your game. People are coming, everyone's trying to be the best that they can when they're going for gold.
Now let's welcome your host, Henry Kelly.
It's not Henry Kelly, it's Sandy Smith is our host this evening. I like the going for gold theme is great. And it's Henry Kelly, so you can't beat it. We've got a couple of score predictions before we go in. Alan McDonald says Glasgow by 17.
I like
Ian
Alan.
Wallace says Edinburgh by 15-20. Andy Lone says Glasgow by 23. Oh, hang on, I've got another song. I've got Going for Gold going in my ear again. Hang on. It's not even that. It's the Blockbusters theme that started playing in my ear. That's disturbing. Alan McDonald said he remembered when those graphics on Going for Gold looked good. So, Sandy, you've got a quiz for Ian and I, so we're gonna try this. I don't normally allow quizzes on the podcast, but I'll allow it.
How many questions do you want to go? It's very simple. Who's it's based on Pro 14 stats in a number of criteria. I've got up to about 15, but you can if you want to keep it tight.
Let's do 10. And if we get bored after 5 and it feels like it's dragging off on, we'll bring it to a close. So let's try for 10.
So. Okay, so based on Pro 14's own stats page on their own website, they've listed the outstanding team in a number of categories. So I think what we'll do is if you can both have a shout as to what it is, and if you get whoever gets it right gets a point. If not, we'll just move on. All right?
Yep, that's fine.
Right. Okay, so start with a really easy one. Most points in the season so far.
That's Leinster.
Yeah. So that's no points for anybody there because you both got it. Okay. Most largest number or most offloads.
Glasgow.
Kings. Not Kings, Cheetahs.
Cammie's right. It's Glasgow.
Danny Wilson said that in an interview a couple of weeks ago. I've been paying attention, Ian.
Okay. Defenders beaten.
Defenders beaten. Now, I'm going to say this is not going to be someone that you'd expect. Otherwise, Sandy wouldn't have mentioned it. Defenders beaten. I'm going to say...
I've narrowed it down to 3.
I'm going to say Ulster for a laugh.
I'm going to go with the Cheetahs again.
It's Glasgow. 366. Believe it or not. There you go.
I was going to say Glasgow. I didn't think it'd be Glasgow twice in a row.
Maybe third.
I know. It was a double bluff, Cammy. So let's go. Clean breaks.
Clean breaks.
I'm tempted to say Glasgow again, but I know it won't be.
Leinster.
Connaught.
Ulster.
I was going to say them.
Still only 1-0 Cammy still. Let's go the other way. Most number or biggest number of tackles.
Oh, most tackles. Is this tackles completed or
tackles completed? Yeah, just a total number. Yeah.
Johnny Gray.
That's correct.
Zebra.
Oh no, I'm going to say it's not Zebra. Whose tackles completed? I think it is going to be. I'm going to go with Ulster.
Correct.
Ulster. He's cheating.
I'm not even looking. I can share my desktop if you want me to check.
I can see you looking into the distance.
That was just the largest number of tackles. So on a related note, tackle success percentage rate, highest percentage rate of tackle success?
Johnny Gray.
He's the answer for everything, really, isn't he?
I know.
All your defensive woes, certainly.
So this is tackle completion rate. So we're looking at something that's going to be.
Who's good at defending?
I don't think Munster have been that good this season. I'd normally say Munster, but I don't think it's Munster.
Ospreys have been woeful.
They have been. I don't think it's going to be a Welsh team. I'm going Edinburgh.
Correct. And
you had to get one Edinburgh in there, Ian.
I know, and the least number of missed tackles, but we'll leave that one on one side. Who has kicked the furthest in terms of meterage?
Teams or is this teams?
Teams, yeah.
Munster.
Kicked the furthest in terms of meters.
Maybe Ulster, actually.
I'm going to say it's Ospreys.
Dragons.
Oh, that's my second answer, my second choice.
And incidentally, when I was looking at this, Dragons are the only team to have scored a drop goal in the Pro 14 this season.
Wow.
Did you see Jamie Roberts has tested positive for COVID?
Yeah, for COVID now.
Wonder if you got that on the second job.
Yeah, I was pleased you finished that with COVID when he said he tested positive.
Okay, let's see. Kicks from hand.
Kicks from hand.
Yep.
So this is going to be someone.
I mean, the temptation is just to say Munster again, but
my temptation is to say Edinburgh because of Henry Purgos.
Yes, that's a point. Actually,
Edinburgh.
Cardiff.
It's actually Scarlets. Edinburgh were actually 8th in the list, and Glasgow, believe it as you would expect, in 12th. Least number of penalties conceded.
Oof, least number of penalties conceded.
Irish teams get away with murder, so we
want to do. It's going to be an Irish team. And of course everyone's in their pocket as well because that's where everyone's based in Ireland.
The D4 Mafia.
That's it. Definitely an Irish team.
Munster.
Leinster.
Zebra.
What?
Oh, yeah. that's the Italian influence.
Yeah,
maybe if they were dirtier, they wouldn't be so rubbish.
So let's see. Last one. Turnovers. Turnovers 1.
Edinburgh.
Glasgow.
Cardiff. Believe it or not.
That's interesting.
So that's 10, and it's 3-0 to Cammy.
That's a pretty much landslide victory.
You can't get back from that. We're not coming back from there.
No, it's just like Glasgow's over.
That was a nice departure, Sandy. Thank you for that. I like that. I'll occasionally allow quizzes just for a wee bit of fun. We'll move on. I'm not going to do the Hands in the Ruck jingle because I've not got it lined up. So you'll just have to sing it to yourselves this week. We'll do Hands in the Ruck. Although I did actually call it Hands in the Rick on Twitter this week. So for 1 week only, it's Hands in the Rick. I'll start with you, Ian, while I see if there's any on Twitter. What's your Hands in the Rick this week?
I don't know. Nothing's. Yeah, something.
Andy Newport jumping the embargo on the Richard Cockerell article.
No, it's the new book which I've alerted you to, Cammy, which is coming out, and I'm sure that everyone will want to read it. Joe Marler's got a new book coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone wants to buy me that for Christmas, please don't. Joe Marler, he just annoys me.
It's just one word.
It's just been it's been such a nice surprise to get a rugby chat going back again. So I've not had time to be negative yet.
Yeah, give it this weekend. Yeah. I'm not here next week. John's in charge.
I know it's going to be mental.
So I'll apologise in advance for that. Sandy, we haven't had many from Twitter this week. I got rickrolled by someone after saying Hands in the Rick.
Saw that, yeah.
Someone sent me a Rick Ashley video. What's had its hands in your ruck this week? You alluded to it earlier.
Yeah, it's pretty much players moaning about being left on the scrap heap after a rugby career of 15 years. That's and particularly in the case of Dylan Hartley, who's also at it this week, complaining about how harshly he's been treated from his his country pile with the 15 acres of land and its own orchard and its duck pond and all the rest of it. Yeah, I always think it's pro sport. You there's a cycle to it. You'll be at the beginning, you'll be at the end, and if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford a rather large house at the end of it at the age of 35, whilst all your mates back from you were at school are still trying to work their way up through the grades in the accountancy firm that they joined. I just think they've had a great lifestyle. You've not had to take life too seriously. Okay, they've had to run about a bit and get hit by people, but I don't think there's a need for dragging up every tiny little thing that went against you in your lengthy career.
I'm going to disagree with you, Si. I think this is probably the first time we've had a disagreement on this podcast.
No, that's
people always leave us reviews saying stop agreeing with each other. I get what you say. I completely understand what you're saying. I think probably the with Dylan Hartley as well. I don't think it was a particularly well written article, given how much time it spent talking about how nice a house he lived in.
Yeah,
given what he was talking
help,
about.
That's for sure.
I think that the only thing I would say is that Dylan Hartley and to an extent John Barclay have a voice that a lot of other players below them don't have. So there will be players, and a lot of players, and you maybe look at someone like Matt Smith, who will leave rugby broken and won't have the same ability to speak out about that. Now, I take your point. I think it's hard to complain when rugby's given you a very good living, but if you don't have figures like Hartley and John Barclay talking about players being left on the scrap heap, then nothing changes in terms of player welfare. So I don't begrudge them raising it as an issue, and I think that we have gone through a period of adjustment that Dylan Hartley and John Barclay came through, where it shifted from amateur to professional.
Yeah,
and I think it'll be about 10 years, I think, before we know how the players we got now are going to come out of it. Where the players that are playing now, the young players like your Darcy Grahams and your Jamie Ritchies, in 10 years' time, if they aren't hobbling around, then we'll know that the welfare systems we've got in place now are working. If they're still hobbling around in 10 years' time, so then there's an issue. And I think that's the problem. We're kind of in this period of readjustment where everyone's going, hang on a minute, we've run everybody into the ground too much, and people have got life-altering injuries and long-term impacts on their health. Things are being done about it, but it's going to take a while before we actually see any outcome of that. So in the meantime, it is incumbent on the players who do have a voice to speak out and talk about it, and not just be, let the boys play.
I actually asked Fraser Brown about Matt Smith, but we're still under embargo for half an hour, so you'll need to read the article.
Read the article that Ian's going to put on the blog. That'll be on the blog. There's a teaser.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's a good box.
Sorry, was that Sandy? It broke up a bit there.
You fair play, Cammy, and I'm not. It's. I think that the vast majority of it would swap places with them in a heartbeat, and and if I'm not sure there's any job in the world offers you, one left that is offering you too much support. So, but maybe this is where it should start. But I think they just need to wind their necks and just a little bit.
Yeah,
as far as I'm concerned.
I think it's how it's framed, isn't it? I think if they're framing it in terms of look how bad this is for me, then it's not a good look. I think if it's framed in I've done all right out of rugby's been very kind to me, but look at the state of me, there are people worse off than me, and we need to talk about how they've been treated. I mean, some of the Eddie Jones stuff just sounded inhumane, and we kind of got that, didn't we? The judo lessons, and who was it, like someone had their career ended by the judo session that Eddie Jones was running. I think I always knew what Eddie Jones was like as a manager, but it didn't particularly help. Ian's really enjoying the ability to make visual cues on the live podcast these days. Much harder to do that in audio form, isn't it, Ian?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So my hands in the ruck is the number of memes I've seen pointing out Scotland can still technically win the Six Nations because we can, but England have to get beaten by Ireland and Italy, I think. Or do Italy have to beat Ireland and England, I think?
Italy have to win both games, I believe.
Both games,
and the chances of them winning one are pretty bloody slim. So
yeah, it's not happening. And I don't like this. Those who saying there's a chance stuff. I'd like, we need to go and give Wales a good game.
I just don't want to finish fifth. It's nice not to finish fifth.
I know. We're on a run. I don't think. When was the last time we finished fifth? It was
last year.
Was that fifth?
I think so. Yeah. I'll need to look it up. How many games did we win? We only won.
Did we just win the Italy game under pre-World Cup?
Yeah, because we got beat at home and the draw with England, obviously. 30 each, but we got beat at home after Wales and Ireland, and then we get cuffed in France because we were muck.
Well, that's very true, isn't it? I'm going to double check. I think you're right. Yeah, we did. We finished fifth by 1 point. Yeah. 1 point behind France. You're quite right.
A point's as good as a mile.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be nice not to finish fifth this year. And there's a fair chance of not finishing.
Very good chance. If we beat Wales, I'm pretty sure they're guaranteed fifth, I think.
Yeah.
So I think really it's between France and England to win it, isn't it? Ireland are pretty much out of it. So, allez les bleus.
Yeah. So that's it for this week on the podcast. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's been short, sharp, and sweet as we preview the 1872. We've managed to keep it to about an hour. I think we're coming in under an hour this week as well. I mean, there's been rugby to talk about as well, which is ludicrous stuff. So yeah, we'll be back next week. I'm on holiday next week. I'm not actually leaving the country. I'm not even leaving the house. I'm just not doing anything. But John's promised to step in, so there'll be a podcast at some point next week, looking back at the last 1872 and looking ahead to the next one. Early September, get signed up for the Patreon, because early September we are going to have our History of the Sevens podcast that we're doing in conjunction with Blood and Mud. We've got Tony Collins, who's a sports historian, very interesting guy. He's actually got a book coming out on the People's History of Rugby League, which he's been tweeting extracts from it. It looks absolutely fascinating. So look out for that, and look out for that podcast. You'll have to sign up to the Patreon to do it. Ian and I are kind of working on a Ben Skeen sitcom as well for Patreon, so that'll be a wee treat. And if you've got any suggestions for Patreon-only content or things you want us to cover, let us know, and we'll happily oblige.
Will be a wee treat unless you're Ben Skeen or related to Ben Skeen.
Yeah, but then you'd have to pay £3 to enter the Richie Vernon Thunderdome, Ian, to access it.
I would hope that Skeeny would cough up the full fiver.
Just to get a shout out on the podcast.
Yeah. Just so he's listening and watching always.
So that's it from us for this week. We'll see you. I'll not see you. Everyone else will see you next week. And keep an eye out for the blog. There'll be lots of articles going on this week.
Sandy's banned from next week because John's running it. It's just going to be the Glasgow.
That's going to be a miserable podcast. That's going to be a miserable podcast, isn't it, Sandy? Two men crying in their beers.
Hopefully they'll be able to hear me smile from all the way from Glasgow.
And on that note,
checking the Facebook feed like Sandy's taking the piss out of us again.
On that note is goodbye from me and goodbye from Sandy and Ian.
Ciao.